This is a very unprofessional attempt to show a way that I use to quickly remove ice. The reason I do this is that I oftentimes, if I'm using or processing something that has a lot of liquid in it, I will remove the ice mid-cycle simply because so much ice can slow down the processing time. So what I do is I apply wax, just a common tree wax. In this case it's a carnival wax, which is a very hard wax from Brazil, hardest there is. And I just put that in almost like you'd polish the finish on a car. Just put this in, let it dry, and wipe it out. And later we'll show you the results of that. While we're waiting for that wax to dry, let me explain something that I did long ago after we first received our freeze dryer. I noticed that the ice was causing the tray, as the ice would build up, causing it very difficult to bring out the tray rack because ice would build right in front of this corner and all along here, but particularly there where it could get in. And so I added this piece right here early on to make it so that this is more flush or uniform all along. So now it makes it much easier to pull this out. However, even that isn't perfect when you have high moisture content foods that build up a lot of ice. It can still be difficult to remove just with the resistance against the rivets and against what's left of that edge. So I have another method that I do that improves upon that as well, which I'll show in a minute. Okay, it's been about 10 or 15 minutes and that wax should be now dry. So it's just a matter of taking it off. Like Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid movie said, wax on, wax off. So we'll just take that off, kind of polish it up before we start our freeze drying cycle. Okay, the excess wax has been removed. The tray rack is now in place. What's next is to install these. Simple 1.25 inch piece of aluminum that can be bought at Home Depot or Lowe's for about $5 or $6, and then just cut to length. These fit right here along the side, so that it will also block that ice that would otherwise hold the tray rack in place. So we'll put those there, attach them with a clip. I next add my sending unit for my indoor-outdoor thermometer, which helps me kind of understand what's going on in there. $10 at Walmart, it's a good investment. And then I'm going to put this in place and start up the freeze dryer. I'm actually pre-cooling it at this time. I'll be letting it cool while I prepare eggs, which will be going in, raw eggs, and I will be pouring those in while they're on the tray. So while the tray is in place, that is. So that's why I'm just pre-cooling it while I prepare the food. Just a good way to get things started. So here we go. I wasn't going to include this, but I realized as I was preparing this that I had yet to refill my vacuum pump with my last filtered oil, which I actually just removed from the freezer, so this is pretty cold and going kind of slow. But that's just kind of a tip that maybe I could point out while we're at it here, because freezing that oil, and I don't know how easy this can be seen, causes the water and sediments in the bottom of the jar to freeze, whereas the oil does not. So just pour that off, and that eliminates the water, and then just simply wash out the jar with hot water and soap later. So anyway, we'll just set that aside, let it filter, and then we'll add it back to our vacuum pump. Well, it's been nearly an hour since I turned the freeze dryer on. Between cracking eggs and other distractions, it's taking me a while. These eggs are 21 eggs to tray here. If you ever do this, make sure you level your freeze dryer first so you don't end up with a mess. These eggs are just simply cracked and then lightly blended. 21 eggs may be a little much, but although they're marked large on the carton, they seem to be a little small, so they fit just fine. Temperature's down to about 15 below already. The oil long ago finished filtering, so we'll pull that aside. Move that over to a temporary container. And pour it off into the jar. Hopefully you'll be able to see the clarity here. And by the way, if you're wondering why this oil is so ambered, it's because it's what remains of the first 1.5 gallons or so of oil that I had when I first started freeze drying over 1.5 years ago. I don't know how well you can see through that. Actually, the remainder of it, that 1.5 gallons, I delivered to Harvey for testing. They wanted to compare it against new oil and a new pump, and the feedback I've gotten is that the oil continues to perform. So maybe that'll help you judge in terms of just how often you have to change your oil or how long filtering can make it last. You decide. Okay, it's been 25 hours since we began this freeze drying batch. I've just turned off the machine. That means with a 9-hour standard freeze time, it's been processing the vacuum pump for about 15 hours. So we're going to go ahead and release the vacuum so that we can open the door. Chamber temperature shows right now at about 24 degrees below zero. So the purpose of this, of course, at this point, is to remove the ice which has built up so that this freeze drying process can continue. You can see we have quite a lot of ice that is formed on the sides, which is why it's important that we be able to get this out without too much difficulty so that we can remove this ice quickly. I'll pull out the eggs, which are not quite done processing yet. They've still got a few hours. This is yet to begin the final dry cycle. But the object here is to do this as quickly as we can because we don't want to warm up the chamber any more than we need to when we want to get this food back to work. So we're going to remove these clips and we're going to remove the tray rack, which comes out much easier thanks to these aluminum inserts. Set this aside. So this next part is really sort of the trick, the purpose of this video, and the reason I started out showing how I used wax inside the chamber. This is a Harbor Freight heat gun. They get very hot. They're not expensive, maybe $12 to $14. The purpose of this is not to melt the ice, but to shock the ice so that the temperature on the one side is different than that underneath, so that it will contract or expand and then enable it to break loose. So we'll try that now. I don't know if you can hear it cracking, which is what it does once it expands. And you may be able to see it, I don't know, it actually will turn white. As I said, the object isn't to melt this, so if I start getting water dripping, then I actually try to move on so that it will not melt the ice. I just want it to break it. That should be enough. I hear about people taking hammers into their freeze dryer to break up the ice. That worries me a little bit. This is much easier. And with the help of that wax, that comes off almost all at once. Do the other side. Okay, again. Oops. Finish up with the bottom. Okay, I'm not concerned that this be absolutely perfect. There's always a couple of spots that seem to want to hold on. I don't know why. But my main concern is to eliminate the bulk of the ice, to be able to get the machine up running again without having to compete with that ice to remove the moisture, which should shorten the dry cycle so that it's not going to be taking so long. I don't care about putting those aluminum strips back in at this point, because the next time I take this out, it will be at the conclusion of the drying cycle. So with that, we'll turn it back on. Put our temperature in place. Baffle, and we'll turn it down so that we again begin the vacuum pump. So that's all it took. I don't know how long that was. Maybe I'll time this and find out. The object is to get the machine empty of ice and back and running as quickly as possible. Well, I figured I might as well take this through to its conclusion. The freeze dryer has just stopped and is beeping at me to remind me of that. So we'll turn that off. First thing I usually do is start the oil draining. Just a convenient time to do it while it's still warm and flows well. We'll let that do its work. We'll release the vacuum. And here are our freeze-dried eggs. A total of 84 dozen, to be exact. Well, here we'll look and see what ice we have remaining. Still some there, but considerably less than what we cleaned out earlier. And then, just to show what this is like, take something that we can remove these eggs with and get an idea of just how dry they are. Well, there those are, 84 eggs ready to be crushed. packaged and stored. Hope this has been helpful.